The evening had a golden glow as the city's elite gathered inside Le Couronne, one of the most prestigious restaurants in town. Crystal chandeliers rained warm light over velvet-covered tables, where laughter mixed with the gentle notes of a live piano. It was the kind of place where deals worth millions were signed quietly between courses, and where the presence of power could be felt as strongly as the scent of aged wine. At a corner table, set apart from the rest with just enough distance to preserve privacy yet still command attention, sat a man whose reputation preceded him. Alexander Hayes, billionaire, investor, and visionary entrepreneur, carried himself with the air of someone used to bending the world to his will. His navy suit was cut with flawless precision, his cufflinks gleamed with understated wealth, and the way he held his posture told the room he didn't need to announce who he was. Everyone already knew. The waitstaff had been on edge all evening. Serving Alexander Hayes was both an honor and a risk. One wrong move, and it could mean their jobs. Plates were inspected 3 times before leaving the kitchen. The maitre d' nearly tripped over himself ensuring everything was perfect. Emily, a young waitress barely 2 years into the job, had been assigned to his table. It was a responsibility she hadn't expected, but she carried herself with quiet determination. She wasn't like the others. She didn't tremble at his presence, nor did she seek his approval with practiced smiles. Emily was tired from her double shift, her shoes pinched her feet, and her apron had been stitched twice after tearing. But she worked hard, always silently telling herself, "This isn't forever. Someday, I'll find something better. For now, this keeps the lights on at home." As she approached his table with a crystal glass filled with vintage red wine, she noticed something odd. The color was darker than usual, its surface swirling thicker than it should have. She hesitated. The aroma carried a faint, bitter note that didn't belong to the expensive bottle she had seen uncorked earlier. A shiver of unease crept down her spine. She looked around. The head waiter was too busy whispering orders. The sommelier had vanished into the back. And the billionaire, oblivious, reached casually for the glass she was setting down. Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent. Who was she, a mere waitress, to question what was in a billionaire's glass? If she was wrong, she could lose her job. Worse, she could humiliate herself in front of every patron watching. But then she saw Alexander's hand close around the stem of the glass. He was about to lift it. Something inside her snapped. "Don't drink that." The words escaped before she could stop them. The sound echoed sharper than she intended, slicing through the soft music and murmured conversations. A hush fell over the restaurant. Heads turned, forks paused midair. At the table, Alexander Hayes froze. His sharp blue eyes shifted from the glass to the waitress standing stiffly before him, her face pale but her gaze firm. "Excuse me." His voice was calm, dangerously calm, carrying the weight of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. Emily's heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Still, she forced herself to stand straight, clutching the tray to her chest. "Sir, please don't drink that. Something is wrong with it." A ripple of shock passed through the diners. A waitress, daring to correct the billionaire. Some exchanged amused looks, whispering that she had just ruined herself. Others leaned forward, curious about what would happen next. The head waiter rushed over, his face red with panic. "Emily," he hissed under his breath. "What are you doing? Apologize to Mr. Hayes immediately." But Alexander raised a hand, silencing the frantic manager. His gaze never left Emily. He studied her, as though trying to read her thoughts. "Something wrong," he repeated slowly, his tone both skeptical and intrigued. Emily swallowed, her voice trembling now but still holding its ground. I don't know how to explain it. When I set it down, the color didn't look right. And when I leaned closer, it smelled bitter. Not like the bottle I saw opened. I know I could be wrong, but I couldn't just stay quiet. Her words tumbled out nervously, but every syllable carried sincerity. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, the faintest trace of amusement curving his lips. The room seemed frozen, waiting for him to react. Would he laugh in her face? Crush her career with a single sentence? Instead, Alexander set the glass back on the table, untouched. His fingers tapped against the wood, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, with a voice steady enough to make the air shift, he said, "Bring me another glass." The manager blinked, then scrambled to obey. Emily's legs felt weak. She had spoken, saved him from drinking, but had she just destroyed her life? Her eyes burned with the sting of unshed tears as she wondered if her courage would cost her everything. Alexander, however, didn't dismiss her. He didn't mock her. He simply leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and studied her as though she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You risked a lot just now," he said quietly enough that only she could hear. "Most would have let me drink it, out of fear or indifference. But you didn't." Emily met his eyes, though her voice shook. "Because if something was wrong, it could have cost you your life." The faintest flicker of respect crossed his face. He didn't smile. Not yet, but he didn't look at her with disdain either. When the new glass arrived, Alexander gestured for the first one, the suspect wine, to be taken to the back. "Test it," he ordered, his tone sharp enough to slice through the air. The staff scurried to obey, fear written all over their faces. And as he sat back, Alexander Hayes kept his gaze fixed on the young waitress, his expression unreadable. The entire restaurant buzzed with whispered speculation. Something had shifted in that moment, not just for him, but for her. Because instead of being dismissed as a foolish girl, Emily had just caught the billionaire's attention in a way no one ever had. And the night was only just beginning. The restaurant seemed to breathe again, but only in hushed tones. Every diner leaned toward Alexander's table, their curiosity barely contained. They had just witnessed something unusual, a billionaire obeying the warning of a waitress. Whispers floated between tables like drifting smoke. Emily remained frozen by his side, her hands gripping her tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Part of her wanted to melt into the floor, to escape the dozens of eyes drilling into her. Another part, the stubborn part that had spoken up, told her to hold her ground. She didn't have long to wonder what would happen next. The head waiter returned first, his face pale, his lips trembling. He bent low, whispering urgently into Alexander's ear. Emily caught fragments. Words like, contaminated, not safe, and poison. Her breath hitched. Poison. Alexander's jaw tightened, though his expression remained unnervingly calm. His fingers laced together as he listened, then he gave the faintest nod. The head waiter straightened, visibly shaken, and hurried off again. Emily's legs felt as though they might buckle. She dared to whisper, "I was right, wasn't I?" The billionaire turned his piercing gaze toward her. For a moment, she wished she hadn't asked. His silence was heavy, deliberate. Then, at last, he spoke. Yes. The wine was laced. Gasps erupted across the restaurant. A couple dropped their forks with a clatter. A woman covered her mouth, horrified. People exchanged wide-eyed glances, unable to believe what they had just heard. Alexander stood. He wasn't a tall man by accident. He was tall by presence, his frame casting authority even when he didn't raise his voice. He beckoned to the restaurant manager with a sharp wave. "Bring me the staff who handled that glass. Every single one." Within moments, the serene rhythm of Le Couronne turned chaotic. Kitchen doors banged open and shut. Security men, dressed in black suits, suddenly appeared like shadows given form. Patrons sat rigid, some whispering theories, others pretending not to watch though they couldn't look away. Finally, a young sommelier was escorted out, flanked by security. His apron was untidy, sweat dripping from his temples. His hands shook so violently he couldn't even clasp them together. Alexander's voice was like steel. "Did you serve me that glass?" The sommelier's lips quivered. I. He broke down before the entire room. "I didn't want to. I swear. They paid me. Offered money I couldn't refuse. I never thought you'd actually." "Who?" Alexander cut him off, his tone sharp. The young man shook his head desperately. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. They contacted me anonymously. Said if I didn't do it, my family would suffer." The confession sent a chill through the restaurant. This wasn't some mistake. It was an assassination attempt. Alexander's face didn't flinch, but his eyes darkened, the calm of a storm before it breaks. He gestured to his security. "Take him. Handle it quietly. And find out who's behind this." The man was dragged out of the room, still sobbing. Emily stood rooted, her heart racing. She could hardly process what had just unfolded. She had saved a billionaire's life. The thought felt surreal. Only minutes ago, she had been invisible to the world's eyes, just another nameless waitress carrying trays and smiling politely. Now, she was at the center of a scene that felt like something out of a movie. Alexander turned back to her. "You saved my life tonight." His words were direct, cutting through the hum of whispers around them. Emily shook her head, almost in disbelief. I only noticed something was off. Anyone would have done the same." "No." His voice was firm. "Most would have ignored it. You didn't." For the first time, his expression softened. He wasn't looking at her like she was a waitress anymore. He was looking at her as though she were something else entirely, an equal, someone who had stood up when no one else dared. The billionaire reached into his pocket and drew out a sleek, black business card. The simple lettering gleamed under the chandelier's light. Alexander Hayes Holdings. Private office. He placed it gently on her tray, the one she was still clutching like a shield. "Come to my office tomorrow morning." His voice was calm, but there was an undertone of finality. "I don't know what your dreams are, Emily. But from now on, waiting tables won't be one of them." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her eyes dropped to the card. Her own name tag, worn, scratched, with fading letters, suddenly felt heavy on her chest. Was this real? Could this be real? The entire restaurant had gone silent again, but this time the energy had shifted. Patrons no longer looked at her with pity or ridicule. They looked at her with awe. When Alexander walked out of the restaurant, his security moving like shadows around him, the diners finally erupted into conversation. Words like hero, lucky, and unbelievable filled the air. Emily stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the black card in her hand. She could hardly breathe. A part of her was terrified. What did he mean by, "From now on, you won't be working tables"? Did he mean to hire her? Test her? Or was this just his way of rewarding her before forgetting her tomorrow? But deep down, a spark ignited. For years, Emily had worked tirelessly, invisible to the world. She had believed her life would always be confined to these walls, carrying trays for people who never bothered to learn her name. Tonight, that belief shattered. The billionaire had noticed her. The billionaire owed her his life. And tomorrow morning, her life would change forever. She tucked the card into her apron pocket, her hands trembling as if holding a secret too heavy to carry. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew one thing for certain: everything was about to be different. As the piano resumed its gentle melody and the restaurant returned to its polished normalcy, Emily slipped into the shadows, her heart still racing. She had entered the night as a waitress. But by dawn, she would be something else entirely.